Hey everybody, it's 4 o'clock Eastern time, and I'm going to have a conversation right now with sort of the political guru of the state of Georgia. His name is Greg Bluestein. He's the political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he knows everything about what's going on in the Peach State. And he's going to talk about, there's so much to talk about. The call that President Trump made to Brad Raffensberger, the Secretary of State, over the weekend, what's going on in the, obviously in the runoff election. So let me just find him right now. And I don't have my trusty Adriana here. So I think I saw him a minute ago. Hold on, everybody. Anyway, hi, lingua franca, my friend. Here you go. We got, hi, Greg. Okay, I waved at you. Now I just have to find you. Okay, hold on a second. I do a search. Okay, here, I see you, Greg. Sorry. Here we go. There you go. Joining us momentarily. What a crazy weekend, everybody. So many crazy things are going on politically. I thought it would be great. Hi, how you doing,
Hello.
Greg?
How's it going, Katie?
So nice to meet you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Of course. I'm here in downtown Dalton, where President Trump is about to arrive. So sorry I'm not at at home or something, but that's why I'm on the street here.
At the carpet capital, right?
You got the carpet capital of the world. You know you're Georgia.
Well, I know, I lived in Atlanta, and interestingly enough, Greg, my dad used to be a political reporter for the Atlanta Constitution back in the day.
No way. What was his name?
His name was John Couric, and he went to Mercer and worked for the Macon Telegraph and then went to the Atlanta Constitution. So it's very funny.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
Worked when Reg Murphy was the editor, I believe.
Yeah, the legend.
Back in the day. So gosh, thank you for doing this, because you must be super busy. Since you're in Dalton, and this is where President Trump is going tonight for a big rally for Purdue and Leffler, obviously the big runoff tomorrow. Can you set the scene for us? Are you going to have you expect a lot of people to show up?
Yeah, if it's anything like his last rally in Georgia, which is actually on the other side of the state in Valdosta, near the Florida border, there will be thousands upon thousands of people. There are already people lining up. It's at the airport, so it's actually not that close to downtown Dalton. It's about 20 minutes away. There'll be food trucks. There'll be music. I don't know how many of your viewers have actually been to a Trump rally, but it's a circus-like atmosphere. It's very energetic, and people show up. And the people started lining up this morning.
And it's very disconcerting, Greg, because as you well know, many of those folks don't seem to follow COVID protocols. A lot of them go without masks. But what's the COVID situation in Georgia right now, and how concerned are people about making this a quote unquote super spreader event?
Yeah, we're in the middle of the biggest surge we've had in Georgia, just like many other states around the country. Our hospitals are strained. Some of our regions only have 1 or 2 ICU beds available. We have lots of supplies of PPE and things like that we were once straining to have. But at this point, there are concerns every time there's a big event like this. We couldn't find direct evidence after the Valdosta rally that there was a giant increased link to that rally, but of course it's hard to determine that. But it has divided this community in Dalton. We talked to some Republican activists who said flatly, they love the president, but they're not going to show up because they're worried about getting the disease.
Well, there's a very interesting dynamic going on right now in Georgia, Greg, with the Republican Party, with the fact that Donald Trump is contesting the results of the hugely damaging phone call that was recorded with Brad Raffensberger, the Secretary of State, and his attorney, where the president was trying to get them to basically overturn the election results in Georgia, find the votes he needed, so to speak. And a lot of people believe the election was compromised, even though there have been investigations, and it's been determined that that is not the case. So explain to folks who are watching how this actually is probably, well, it's my understanding that this may very well hurt the Republican candidates for these Senate seats.
That's what's keeping the Republican operatives here up at night, is that Trump is sending these conflicting messages to members of his loyal supporters saying, go vote in a rigged election, right? I mean, you can't get much more conflicting than that. Here in Georgia, we've had 3 separate tallies of the 5 million ballots. Each one of them showed that Joe Biden had a 12,000 or so vote victory in Georgia. Every challenge to the election in court was tossed out at every level, from county level to the state Supreme Court. A U.S. Supreme Court challenge lodged by Texas was tossed of Georgia's vote. And Republican state elections officials are, as we speak, they just finished up a press conference debunking all these conspiracy theories that Trump has lodged. So, but yet there's still a significant portion of his base who believe it and who might not vote.
I saw that most of the people who aren't voting are in fact conservative Republicans. And meanwhile, if you look at the early voters, 3 million early voters in the state of Georgia, and they're predominantly Democratic voters, correct?
Yeah, we can't exactly tell, for certain, but Democrats feel like they have got a pretty formidable edge when it comes to the early vote right now. About 200,000 is the consensus figure I've heard from different Democrats. That's a pretty big hole that Republicans have to fill on election day. They're always favored to beat Democrats on election day in terms of election day turnout, and that's what happened in November. Democrats built a pretty big edge. Republicans narrowed it, but who knows with all these different events. It's a January 5th runoff. A lot of voters aren't used to voting in the beginning of January anywhere in America. So it's very, very bizarre dynamics here.
Tell me, so Greg, what are the polls saying right now? We've got John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock running on the Democratic side, David Purdue and Kelly Leffler. How's it looking right now according to the latest polls?
Yeah, great question. And basically, I should just preface this with the two Democrats and the two Republicans are essentially running as joint tickets
Right.
because Democrats need to win both seats in order to flip control of the Senate. So they might as well run together. And Republicans are pooling their resources and effectively running together too. While polls around the nation were somewhat off, in Georgia they were on. So Georgia they were on target. Most polls showed a deadlocked race for president. And when you have a 12,000 margin, that's as close to a deadlock as you can get. It's been really hard to poll this race, though. Very few reputable pollsters have waded into this contest because of the unique dynamics, because of the Christmas holiday and all that. So, but the few polls that have come out have mostly shown same thing, a deadlock in Georgia.
Yeah, someone said, with all due respect, the polls are just, obviously the polls have been all over the place, although some of the state polls have been more accurate.
Yeah.
I think they've been kind of all over the place. Well, what is the impact of this call that the president made with Brad Raffensberger, who's really withstood tremendous pressure through this whole campaign and the election and the results? Is that going to hurt the Republican tickets, Republican side? And what just the overall reaction to that bizarro call?
Yeah, hand-wringing from Republicans. The two Republican Senate candidates have not commented on it, including this morning. Kelly Leffler launched a fly-around tour, was asked directly about it, and just sidestepped the question. Said, "I'm focused on tomorrow, not anything else." Democrats have used it to play into their argument that the two Republican incumbents are more interested in sucking up and cozying up to President Trump than they are into representing Georgians. But at the same time, Democrats have not made their case all about Trump. They've really made their case about how they can best support Joe Biden and push his legislative agenda.
But it's so strange, Greg, because here the president, who ostensibly would help the Republican candidates, is so focused on his own loss in the national election. He's sending out so many strange signals to Republican voters with his rhetoric. And now he may be responsible, if it turns out this way, for the Democrats controlling Congress. Yeah,
and Republicans have already tried to plant that seed. I mean, I got a lot of text messages over the last few days accelerating what Republicans have already said, which is, hey, if we lose Tuesday, you know why? It's President Trump. They'll blame President Trump, and they'll blame Brad Raffensberger for that leak of the tape. They'll try to say that he, that was so damaging that it cost them votes in the end. Who knows what the outcome is? But I know this for certain. I've talked to dozens of Republicans around the state at rallies, at Stop the Steal events, all these different events all over the state. And I've come across many who have cast doubts about the integrity of the election, and some who have said that they simply might stay home tomorrow.
It is just crazy. So you, in terms of turnout, Republicans generally out turnout Democrats in these kinds of runoff elections. But it may be, just like everything else lately, it may be turned on its head with this recent election or with tomorrow's election, really.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Katie. I mean, Republicans have won every statewide runoff in Georgia history. So that gives you a sense of how strong and dominant Republicans usually are in these contests. And that's because it tends to draw out an older and whiter electorate, which in Georgia means more Republican. But there's differences this year. Of course, now Georgians are bombarded by more than $500 million worth of ads. Everyone here seems to understand the stakes of this race. It's effectively shaping Joe Biden's first 2 years in office. And Democrats feel like they can help drive out a more youthful and more diverse electorate because John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are on the ballot.
Well, as the demographics in the state have been changing dramatically, and people are talking about a new Georgia and a new South. A lot of people who fled the state are now relocating in the state. Younger, as you said, more diverse population. I lived in Atlanta, I guess from like 1980, 81 to 1984. I mean, this is long I've been around, Greg. We don't have to get into that. But I mean, it's just a very different Georgia than it was when I lived there. And that's going to have a huge impact on this and future elections too, don't you think?
It will. And look, and when you lived here, it was a Democratic run state, but it was very conservative Democrats. And since then, the politicians have changed parties, but the ideology has mostly stayed the same. Very conservative Republicans now dominate the state. Democrats, though, finally feel like they've got a path. They hadn't flipped the state in a presidential election since 1992. And for years, every year I've written about how Democrats feel like this is the cycle, and it hasn't been. But they've narrowed the gap. They've narrowed it from 8 points in 2012 to 8 points in 14 to 5 points in 16 to 1.5 points. Brian Kemp defeated Stacey Abrams by about 1.5 points. To now, for the first time, they can hang a statewide victory on their collars. Like they've got Joe Biden flipping the state by 12,000 votes. Not a lot, but a win is a win. So these two Democrats feel like they've got a path to follow.
Yeah, somebody just mentioned I was friends with Susan Yao. Yes, Susan Weltner. She went to UVA with me, an Atlanta girl. I don't know if you remember her. Her father was a well-known civil rights judge.
Charles Weltner, a Supreme Court judge. Yes, in Georgia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Was a good friend of mine in college, and someone just mentioned that. Well, gosh, it's going to be really interesting to watch the election tomorrow. I know Brad Raffensberger gave a press conference. Did he say anything that was noteworthy? Greg, I missed it because I had to run an errand. What did he say?
They've been having what they call Disinformation Mondays, and it's when they basically debunk all these conspiracy theories. And so they spent most of the press conference, him and Gabriel Sterling, one of the state's, one of his top deputies, going line by line on conspiracy theories and saying, hey, these don't exist. Don't believe this. Don't believe that. And so, and that's a valuable, it's unfortunate that state elections officials have to go to that time and effort to do that. But that's just where we're at in Georgia right now.
It's just so crazy. And it doesn't seem to have that much of an impact on who are insistent that, the election was rigged. And I don't know how you get through it, especially when they're consuming news and information that basically is confirming, what they think. So it's a real conundrum for democracy, isn't it, Greg?
It is. And one of the most fascinating parts of that Trump call, I thought, was when Brad Raffensperger pointed out, hey, Mr. President, I think you're buying into the social media too much. And he goes, no, I'm buying into Trump media. And that shows you a window. He's just listening to this echo chamber, and it doesn't really matter as much unfortunately, what mainstream media, what people like me and you do, because there's no getting past that disinformation for so many Americans.
I think it's going to be such a challenge in the months and years ahead to figure out this huge chasm and this cavernous divide between media and then this sort of propaganda media. It's really worrisome, I think. Hey, before we go, a couple of people, Stacey Abrams, and I wanted to talk about her because she has done a remarkable job of getting out the vote. Someone asked if I had interviewed her. I interviewed her on my podcast a number of months ago. But, Do you think her get out the vote efforts, Greg, are going to pay off for the runoff as well?
I do. I mean, look, her efforts to not just register hundreds of thousands of Georgians through voter outreach initiatives that she launched, but also, and this is important, she showed Democrats that they can embrace liberal ideals, liberal ideologies in a way that Democrats in Georgia just did not do, and still have an effective path to winning. She didn't win, but she came very close. And before her, Democrats ran largely as Republican lights. They ran as NRA Democrats. They
Right.
stayed away from national figures. They stayed away from President Obama.
Sam Nunn Democrats, right? I mean, conservative.
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of what my dad was. He called himself a blue dog Democrat, not a yellow dog, but a blue dog. But anyway,
But yeah, ran as centrists, right? And Stacey Abrams comes and she supports gun control. And she talks about how she wants to expand abortion rights and bring more parity to income inequality, raise the minimum wage, and all the stuff that doesn't sound too controversial in some parts of the country. But in Georgia, it was something else, right? In Georgia, she was labeled, a radical. A lot of things they're labeling Raphael Warnock, and she came within a whisker of winning.
yeah, I mean, the whole socialist label that even people on this feed are claiming about certain Democratic candidates. I mean, that's sort of the buzzword that has been weaponized, I think, in many ways for people who may be left of center. And Brian Kemp, of course, he was Secretary of State and oversaw his own election, gubernatorial election against Stacey Abrams. And I asked Brad Raffensberger about that, Greg, and I was like, what the hell? How can that be? How can that happen? And, he kind of skirted around the issue, but how can somebody running for office also be in charge of the election?
Yeah, it's a very prickly situation and there's no state law banning it. What Brian Kemp said back when we wrote all those stories about why he was staying in office was, and which is true, in Georgia, the 159 counties actually administer the election. They execute the election. His office oversees it. But yet, it still brings up all these conflict of interest, and it looks bad. And even some of Kemp's allies said afterwards it was a big mistake.
Sorry, I was just saying perception's everything.
Yeah.
And he would say, how it's set up, but it smelled bad and looked bad.
Exactly. And it's going to be hard seeing another Secretary of State take the same path to running for a higher office without stepping down. I can't imagine it really happening in the future, but who knows?
What happened to Brian Kemp and Donald Trump? They don't seem buddies. I mean, that relationship is totally frayed. I mean, what is going on? Does somebody have naked pictures of somebody? What the hell is that?
I know, it's been alarming. I mean, because you go from 2018, where Trump's last-minute endorsement helps Brian Kemp just rout a Republican runoff opponent, and he comes to Georgia the Sunday before the general election against Stacey Abrams, and you could rightly claim that he helped a last-minute surge, election day surge for Republicans. Who knows if he was the deciding factor? But I think what started happening was Trump was very upset that the governor picked Kelly Leffler over his favorite, Congressman Doug Collins, for that open Senate seat. And then since then, the relationship just frayed, deteriorated to the point where now Trump openly called for Governor Kemp to step down and resign.
You would know more about this. This is going to be my last question. You've been so generous with your time. So thank you, Greg, for that.
No problem.
I was saying how Brad Raffensberger, was pretty courageous with a lot of pressure, constant pressure from the president for weeks now to do things that really weren't kosher. But when I said that he deserved a Profile and Courage Award, there were a lot of people who had real issues with him and his record on voter suppression. So as someone who covers politics daily in Georgia, can you explain why a lot of people are not so happy with him?
Yeah, look, I mean, he's also made a number of decisions that have infuriated Democrats over the last 2 years, including recently launching investigations into what he says are issues involving groups that Stacey Abrams founded. So a lot of Democrats are very, very quick to point out that yes, while he is being upheld as as a paragon of public interest and public service right now for standing up against President Trump. And as much as that's to be lauded, he's still very conservative, and he has not embraced a lot of the efforts to expand voting rights the Democrats wanted him to embrace.
Interesting, interesting. And a lot of people say he was just doing his job. You know, he shouldn't be praised so much. But I think the bar is so low, and so many Republicans have caved to Donald Trump when he pressures them. I think just somebody standing their ground and saying, actually, this is the situation, Mr. President. By comparison, that person seems like a hero, right?
I think you're right. And look, it's not just Secretary Raffensberger in Georgia. It's Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, and it's Governor Kemp. Both of them have pushed back on his narrative that the election was stolen in Georgia. And both of them have paid a price. Both of them have been attacked by not just the president on social media, but a lot of his supporters. They're being ratioed on Twitter. They're getting threats. And the governor even came out and said, look, talk to me. You can talk to me man to man or woman to man, but don't go after my kids. Don't go after my wife. Don't go after, county officials and state staffers and not people who aren't public figures, because that's what's happening in Georgia. It's really concerning.
And do you think anything's going to happen to President Trump? I'm talking to Neil Katyal, who was at the Justice Department at 6. But do you think, what do you think the implications will be for that phone call? Is that just Trump being Trump, or is he going to be prosecuted for some criminal activity?
Well, even the Secretary of State today said that while he can't investigate because he feels like there's a conflict of interest because he was on the call, that he might ask the Attorney General or the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, which is the county that Atlanta's in, their district attorney up to investigate. And just before we spoke, I tweeted out several letters written to ask federal prosecutors and state investigators to investigate as well. I don't think much will come of this, and maybe if President Trump does pardon himself, like there's a lot of speculation that he might, this will be one of the reasons why. But still, it's a valid question for people to be asking whether or not he violated state law.
I mean, isn't election tampering against the law? I mean, in essence,
it is. It is spelled out in Georgia law that you cannot solicit election fraud, and of course, there's extortion too.
Wow. Well, to be continued. Greg, it's really, sorry, we're fostering some puppies and they're making a lot of
I got one too.
What time does the rally start, Greg?
It's at 9 p.m. and us reporters have to be there by 6ish. So I've got plenty of time.
Please stay safe and make sure you wear a mask and be socially distant. Just because other people don't have the common sense to do that doesn't mean that you have to put your health at risk. So
don't you worry, my wife would kill me if I don't.
And maybe if you get a chance, I know you're going to be super busy, but maybe you can do an update with us tomorrow and kind of let us know how everything have the results of this runoff.
I'd be happy to do so.
When do you think we'll have the results?
Oh, when do you think it might be Thursday, it might be Friday. Yeah, we're looking at, remember, there's so many mail-in ballots that take longer to process in Georgia. Right. And if you look back to November, networks didn't call Georgia's election for 10 days.
Oh, I remember.
So we could, yeah, I can't forget either, but we could be in for it for a while.
Well, thank you for all your hard work. We really appreciate it. And let's stay in touch and good luck with everything, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.